Hello, everyone. Are we ready for this? Are we awake after a heavy lunch, spicy heavy lunch? Are we ready? Thank you. And today, next 45 minutes, we will have a very interesting conversation on the topic, which is one of the hot topics, AI infrastructure. Before we go into this, I have an eminent panelist here. We have 3 practitioners who have joined us, CTOs, as you can see. And then we have somebody from CBRE who brings a different perspective of investment, real estate, ROI. So my job as a moderator would be to tie these jewels together and deliver a meaningful ornament, whatever you like, okay? So that's my job is here for the next 45 minutes. Now, in terms of level setting, AI adoption, AI stack. As I mentioned in the morning as well, right now we're seeing the 5th generation of AI, Gen AI, agentic AI, huge money pumped in, and that's where the notion of AI race comes in. Significant investment is being made into AI infrastructure from a variety of players. What are end users doing around AI and AI infrastructure? In the previous panel, you heard about how VCs are looking at AI in general, what kind of AI investments are made, is it for India, is it for the globe? Now, what we will do today is we will actually bring you a practitioner view. How are enterprises looking into AI and thinking through that? So the founders, the investors, this panel will give you a user perspective, how users are thinking about AI, what are the use cases, adoption barriers, and you as founders, then you can go back and think of what you can do to address. So let's get started with this. And I was looking at some of the numbers for India. And this is not from Gartner, but this is India co-location data center footprint, which says for 2020, 400 megawatt of data center is existing in India. 25, this goes to 4 times, which is about 1,600 megawatts. And guys, this is India, by the way. And here is the forward-looking view, future, because that's where I believe the real value of this conversation lies, is projected to be 8,000 plus megawatts. So 400 to 1,600 to 8,000 plus. That's the kind of trajectory we expect for co-location data center. What is driving this growth? AI infrastructure is driving that growth. So when we look into these projections for the future, my first question to the panelists, and I would like to focus on the practitioners first here, and maybe we can start with you. How do you see, when we think of these projections, how do you see the capacity creation around AI in your organization, AI adoption, and the changes in applications or infrastructure that you and your team is driving?
So, to put it, quite bluntly, let me put it this way, that in retail in India, which includes F&B, F&B is a subset of retail, everyone is trying to find the right use case from an ROI standpoint. Okay? Now, given that, my organization as well as a couple of our peers, couple of key things are definitely being looked at from AI perspective. The easiest thing people had started off, more in retail, less in F&B, was actually getting the content generation bit in e-commerce. And you don't need that more in F&B because you're talking of very limited SKUs as compared to retail, where you're talking of a few thousand SKUs. So that was a very, very quick win. When it comes to our organizations and specifically in F&B, the interest areas are more in supply chain. Okay? So one of the typical problems that F&B faces is around wastage. Okay, and that's a very, very typical problem of QSR and restaurant industry and F&B cafe industry. And that ties up to 2 pointers. One is how well you are actually predicting demand, point number one. Point number two is how well that ties to your processes and your data around both consumption and the inventory management on a daily basis. Okay? Because unlike retail, wherein you can actually count your data, you have the luxury of counting stuff once in a couple of weeks. Here you're talking of end of day, right? So a lot of focus there to get that sharper. The other use case that many people are dabbling, and they're dabbling faster in that area, is on customer analytics. Okay? Because again, as data is poured in, what you and when in college we used to read about customer segmentations of the world, that analysis is getting sharper with better tools. Okay? So you are able to, but of course, with that is coupled the regulation, which is also very, very required, the DPDP rules, which is also very, very, very well required. Then and so that's a very, it's a headwind as well as a tailwind. The tailwind is on the tools getting better to analyze better. So I think these are couple of very, very definite areas wherein, F&B industries of the world or retail industries of the world are moving on here. Those who are heavy on e-commerce and which is not typically F&B, which is more retail focused, because typically F&B in India is more aggregator led when it comes to online. There, the funnel analysis, funnel analysis from e-commerce standpoint, that's definitely getting sharper, and hence the recommendation engine is getting sharper. Okay. Honestly speaking, the recommendation engine was good even in the pre-Gen AI days. It is just that with ML and with advancement in technology, you are getting, as in customers are getting real-time recommendations much better.
Yeah. Okay. Same question, Mandar, for you. You represent Kirloskar manufacturing setup, AI adoption, where you are.
So I think before I go to the question, first of all, thank you, TiECON Vizag, for inviting me. Pleasure to be with these eminent leaders on the stage. We Kirloskars as a group, we are into real estate, manufacturing, NBFC, and education. So that's a spread of the domains we have. Said that when we are into manufacturing, the focus is more of a renewable energy and energy powers. So we are more into that space. Before even I answer your question, I think, let's see at the trend of how the data centers evolved. When there was a .com boom, We all know that it all started with a small server farms, correct? And hats off to the person who has coined this term as data center. It puts data at the center. I mean, have you ever thought about it? Nobody has coined it. If you Google it out, it's just came back. And in the morning, we heard that Mr. Tapan was mentioning that knowledge is no more power, but I think data is the power now, correct? I always say on a lighter note, and I think Deb has heard me earlier also, data, those who understand Hindi, data hai. You know, so data gives you. What it gives you? It gives you a power of CID. We all know CID. So it gives you a power of conviction, intelligence, and decision making. So which means whether you go from CPUs to GPUs to AI to quantum computing, the center would always be data. And that's what we are custodian, all of us on the stage are the custodian of the data. Now said that when we are trying to evolve from CPUs to GPUs, the right use cases have to be thought of in the organization. We have started it. We have started the AI adoption. It started with a smaller use cases of RAG. Then we went to the Gen AI, and we think we are going towards the agentic AI. But to be honest, I still don't see a difference between RPA and the agentic AI coming out that strongly. If you ask me, I mean, what does agentic AI do differently is the crux. Because RPA can do the same rule-based thing. So we have adopted certain use cases in our service, in our spares, doing the analysis in terms of the customer feedback, trying to say that, you know, customers across the country speak different languages. How do we ensure what are the sentiments of those customers? That's one of the use cases. We have started something for AI for cyber security. People often talk about AI for applications. I think nobody talks about AI for infrastructure or cyber security as such. But I think that's what we have tried to do, AI for the cyber security. So all put together with this, I could see that there is a increasing demands of the GPU infrastructure at least now, which means everybody needs AI. So we are moving towards the AI need. As you rightly said, the power is going to go up from 1.5 megawatts to 8 megawatts by probably by 2030. But at the same time, I think even the data centers are evolving from storage to high density hubs, which is nothing but the liquid cooling. But again, the challenge is there will be an incremental power requirements, at least 40 to 45, I think, terawatts by 2030. So yeah, India is getting ready for the AI-based infrastructure. What about the quantum computing? You know, I think we are nowhere there, to be honest, because quantum computing, if you know, would require a cooling which is called as cryogenic cooling. I don't know how many of you know that. And yeah, I mean, of course, the Pi guys are raising their hands, they know that, but we are nowhere there. Yeah, so cryogenic cooling is nowhere. We have to still figure out how we do that. When I talk about the security aspect of quantum side of it, quantum computing, you know, post-quantum cryptography is, right now people are just evaluating what it means. I mean, forget about the security of it. So I think with those all, we are just ready to take a leap, playing with the data at the center to go to the AI-based infrastructure or the data centers. That's what I would summarize. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandar. So, data at the center, early use cases, power, cooling, and we'll go a bit deeper into power and cooling in the next few minutes. But as you can see, the sentiments, early stage adoption, few specific use cases, with a lot of optimism for the future. Same, I'll go to you, Phani, in terms of AI adoption, initial use cases. How is that panning out for you and your organization?
So I guess I'll bring a bit more of a global perspective here, because Gracenote actually is a global company serving, I mean, majority of the revenues coming from US and followed by Europe and then India and Asia. So for those that don't know Gracenote actually is a media tech company. In fact, most of your most of your discovery of media, whether you are doing it on an LG, Samsung, Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, Apple TV, no matter where you're doing it, it's most probably powered by Gracenote metadata. So Apple, Amazon, Google, Tata Sky, Geo Hotstar, Comcast, the likes of all these are customers of Gracenote. So we are in the business, and we've actually been doing this for the last 40, 50 years, but we are in the business of creating the data that actually powers the entire discovery of media out there. Very interestingly for us, this year, it's been a transformational year, leveraging AI, using AI, creating AI, front and center. We are actually in the thick of things. In fact, one of the large programs that we are doing actually redoes the entire data creation pipeline that was created for the last 20, 25 years. We're replacing that entire thing with AI-infused creation pipeline, in the sense lots of AI algorithms actually kind of are actually being used to kind of rewrite the entire pipeline. This is like a 2-year project. Interestingly, as a result of this, things that used to take probably 5 weeks now take 2 days. Things requiring thousands of people move to hundreds of people. Right? These are the kind of outcomes that are manifesting from this program. In addition, for us, we also know that most of our customers are actually kind of on the journey of really trying to kind of leverage conversational AI and so on and so forth to really kind of communicate with their customers, power a lot of discovery. Because as you see, the youngsters actually no longer are searching on Google or actually kind of doing it. It's ChatGPT, it's Gemini, it's moved on, right, I think. So the whole discovery. So we're actually trying to also play into the center of it. We are the data hub. Data is the core of it. All of the LLMs out there actually get trained and fine-tuned at intervals. They hallucinate. They don't have the recent data to kind of work with. So using things like RAG, grounding, or even MCP tooling and so on and so forth, at Gracenote, we are actually kind of building all of these tools for them to work kind of in the form of like their agentic workflows to kind of get the most recent discovery of things. So we're actually powering their AI journeys for all of these customers, the likes where they're actually trying to kind of take their discovery to through AI. And lastly, we ourselves, in addition to rewriting our pipe, we now go into the stream and actually start kind of getting data from within the stream itself, using a lot of vision language models and lots of vision techniques and things like that. Long shot, I think in your question when you were asking, given all of what we are doing, our storage requirements actually keep changing drastically on us, because now we don't just store data, we actually have to store a lot of the vectors from the multimodal formats. We no longer just actually kind of count our cost structure in the form of even storage and this. We actually have to provision enough number of dollars for the tokens that we are going to use with all of the LLMs and VLMs and various things that we have to use. So as a practitioner, I think your orientation, your cost structure, all of that actually is kind of drastically changing on you. So for us, when we created 26 budget, it actually looked very, very different than 25 budget, just simply put, right? I think that's the level of shift and change.
And I would just speak on that last part that you said, 26 budget looks very different than a 25 budget. And without sharing your confidential details, give us a bit of a color on that. What is that shift looking like? Is it more towards storage, more towards new ways of powering the data center, or something else?
No, the shift is actually pretty broad, Naveen, in the sense today, so in 25, just saying, my developers were still doing development from the sense of traditional software engineering.
Yeah.
Late 25, they started actually kind of leveraging way too many AI tools.
Yep.
Some of them actually has moved to being totally power users. Like in some programs, we're actually generating 75 to 80% of our code rather than writing code at this juncture. In situations like that, the cost structure, when I'm looking at it, is not only the people cost, but the tool cost. I'm not actually kind of saying, am I growing from 300 developers to 350 developers? I'm actually kind of saying, what are the tools that I'm bringing to their disposal? How do I empower them, enable them such that they're actually able to do the equivalent of 400 developers, but with this investment coming in? So it's a little bit of a switch, and it's a very simple thing that I was telling, which is actually powering kind of your software engineers to kind of do something very, very different. Similarly, when I'm actually kind of looking at it, and I was talking about we were going into now into using vision language models, kind of building some of our own models and all of that. Now I actually have to be very mindful of, I actually had to set X amount of budget away, X millions of dollars, because we know these many LLMs will actually be used, this much of token cost will actually kind of hit us in the process thereof, and so on and so forth. Now, similarly, when we're actually kind of looking at, as I was telling, right, the data, our storage requirements are actually kind of doubling, simply put, right? Because we're actually approaching problems in a very different manner. So efficiencies, massive efficiencies are gained, which cuts costs in many other places. The investments into infra actually starts raising because of actually what and how we are doing things.
Okay, superb. So far you heard about 3 different organizations on 3 different pace of AI adoption, global versus Indian context as you got it. Now we will move to the 4th panelist, and Devi, you know, I would love to get more business perspective from you. I mean, as CBRE, and I'm sure you know you are going to talk about what your organization does for everybody's interest, but then how do you see this AI adoption at varied stages driving the AI infrastructure build out? Do you see a hype around that? Do you see a lot of focus on that? And can you also go a little bit into the economics of that? Is it a profitable business to venture out? So,
thank you. So again, thank you everyone, and thank you Kalyan for inviting me. I think this has been so far like a great experience to be a part of. So to answer your question, like I started my journey in data centers exactly when we were at the hockey stick growth. 2020 is when I started, and since then we have seen like a really significant growth in like you gave the numbers. Basically I feel that today we are again at that inflection point because AI is coming. Like, he just mentioned that, Phani said that, the demand for storage has actually doubled. And that's what we are seeing right now. There are 2 things that are happening in India. One, of course, AI, is driving demand. Second thing, we have a data localization policy. So a lot of the data of India, which is stored in other countries like US and Europe or Singapore, has to be brought back to India. So both of these factors put together is, kind of driving the demand. So far in the last 4 years, we have primarily seen build-outs for cloud. Now, every time somebody is planning a data center, there is, at the design stage, you have to think about what is this data center going to service. Is it going to service cloud? Is it going to service AI? If it's servicing AI, is it going to be for training? Is it for inference? And there's so much of ambiguity around that today because you don't get customers upfront. When you're starting, when you're buying land, when you're planning the design, getting the approvals, you have no idea who your customers are going to be. So you have to take a call on, how you want to build it out and accordingly target your clients. Today, if we look at India, we have just 3 hyperscalers, who are driving big demand, which is Google, Amazon, Microsoft. All of them have had their phases where they come out with 200, 250, 300, 400 megawatts, and then they slow down, and then again they come back, with their demand. So we keep having these cycles. And today in India, what I'm seeing personally is that there is kind of a polarization happening when people are looking at investing in data centers. everyone wants to chase these big ticket customers, and the smaller enterprises, which is anywhere from, could be a small, 2 rack, 3 racks to maybe up to 4, 5 megawatt. I think that segment is kind of becoming a little bit less catered to. In fact, I was talking to one very large data center operator. They have about 4 data centers under construction, and one, of course, is something that they have given out to a hyperscaler, but the other 3 were supposed to cater to enterprises. And they came back and said that now we only want to focus on hyperscalers. We want to sell this data center that we are building. So, so that unfortunately is a scenario which I'm seeing, that capital is chasing these 3 large customers. And so to some extent, there is a polarization in the market. But like I said, most of the demand, which is there from these 3 customers is for AI right now. Navi Mumbai has been kind of leading the demand. Hyderabad is the second one that's, been very, the government has been very friendly. And so we have seen 2 large hyperscalers coming in. And now Vizag is like the next big buzz, right? If we look at till date, I mean, CBRE has given a number of, I think, 90 billion investments, which I don't agree with personally. I think my estimate is around about 8 to 9 billion has been invested in data centers so far. But what has been committed for Vizag is $40 billion. So imagine if all that goes through, we are going to see Vizag as like one big player for AI. And this is going to be an AI hub primarily. So, so I think there is a need. All hyperscalers are massively investing in AI infrastructure. And we will see that going up to 8 gigawatts. I don't know whether it's 8, 10, it's anybody's guess today. But we will see massive investments in data centers, and that trend is going to continue for the next few years. Profitability you spoke of, again, a black hole, because we are still so early in the data center journey, right? Today, profitability is only in Excel models. So a lot of the investors also do not understand the sector. Like, a lot of my conversations just goes in educating people about data centers, because people look at it as real estate. Okay, annuity income, I'll apply a cap rate, I want a 8% cap rate and this is the valuation. It doesn't work like that. Data centers are an operating business. So 90% of the people I speak to who say I want to invest money in data centers, I discourage them. And then they never contact me back again. So I just say it as it is. I mean, there's no point investing money when you don't understand the business. This is a very niche business, and it needs those skills. So, so profitability, we'll have to see how it works. But my sense is that there is a consolidation that will happen eventually in the market. Once the scale increases, because data centers is all about scale. We have seen that in US, we have seen that in the region, in APAC as well. I think once we get to a certain scale, the industry valuation and profitability will be good.
Okay. So data center investments, relatively slow ROI, niche business. Now with that, let's think through a little bit more about AI data centers, how they actually impact the organizations and your data center design and the principles of data center creation. So maybe, Mandar, if you want to take that question in terms of impact on 2 aspects. One is the power. And if you guys track all the large data centers being created in Texas, for example, they are created there because of cheap and easy power availability. How do you as an enterprise think of it? Is that part of your thinking? or you want to leave that for the service provider to deal with it when it comes to the power part of AI infrastructure?
I think interesting. I'll try to answer that because I come from a typical IT background, but whatever I deal with the business and whatever I heard, I think two things are going to be very critical when you talk about the AI-based infrastructure.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first one you said is power. I don't call it as a power, I would call it as a energy. Okay, and that's going to be a real renewable energy. So I think the first challenge is how do we move towards the 100% renewable energy? Not zero, but net zero. I mean, yeah. So that's what I think we should aim at. Now, said that, there are investments being made in terms of how do I power this data centers, AI-based data centers, to provide this renewable energy. How do I ensure that the raw source of the power comes at the last, giving me the cost optimization? So for example, we in the organization, what we have started thinking of, and we have, in fact, we have done this prototype for our own data center, which we are revamping to move towards so-called AI-based data center, I would say. So first thing we did was we powered it with our own generators, ghar ki kheti, so we did it. But we ensured that those generators would run on a alternative fuels, not the typical diesel ones. I cannot disclose what fuels, but let's assume as hydrogen, for example, okay? Then we said that if, what if this fails? I mean, gensets are good, but genset, what if generator fails? Then we said, why not put Kirloskar solar? Because we have a Kirloskar solar.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Somebody came and said, boss, this is a, the IT guys are always talking about redundancy. We said, let's apply the technique to the business. We said, if Kirloskar solar fails, what then? We said, let's put the Kirloskar UPS. So we established a unit which is started working on now, probably building a UPS or probably white labeling it. And then we said, okay, one more redundancy, if Kirloskar solar fails, then what? And obviously, the world is moving towards the EV now. So we said, why not do a Kirloskar battery? And that's what we're aiming for. And this all put together would give you a kind of a concept, a term which we all have heard, it's called the microgrid. I think this would ensure that the data center meets the 100% renewable energy and the power source, achieving that cost optimization. And at the last paying to the government for the source if we want to. In fact, you can also do a net metering there, correct? So I think that's one of the things. The second thing we are trying to do is how do we deploy the AI-driven algorithms for our own data center? Which means how can I monitor the heating, the heat generated, controlling the consumption of power, probably in future triggering the cooling for it. Those type of use cases is what we are trying to do. So I think power, the cooling, and the location of the data center would be critical if you ask me. When I say location, I think why do you think Pi has moved to Amravati? Yeah, so I think a great thought by Kalyan, I'm sure. Apart from the factors I mentioned, I think you would always like to move to a city, tier 2, tier 3, which gives you a lower ambient temperatures. And that's one of the critical factor when we are talking about AI generating more and more heat, correct? I think these are the factors I think would be important to answer your question. Thank you.
Perfect. And this clearly gives a view to the founders and investors in terms of the future bets. Those bets that enterprises would care about around various renewable energy sources. So when you're looking into those initial ideas and companies, look for some of the ideas that resonate with these challenges.
I'll go to you, Phani, in terms of the same question about powering the data center, the energy sources. Have you gone through any changes? Are thinking through potential changes around energy, alternate sources?
At Gracenote, we're a pretty big AWS house. So there isn't the immediate thing for us of actually kind of looking at it from our own hosted or co-located element of it. But I mean, if you don't mind, I'll actually offer a perspective there, especially kind of from what's playing in the Indian ecosystem and how I see some of this actually kind of evolving. I think in the Indian ecosystem, if you actually kind of look at it today, the primary advent of AI or element of AI is actually kind of happening majorly in the innovation, in the application space. So there is, I mean, like, if I just sit with some of my friends, I think right now, if I just try to count, there are at least like 7, 8 of my friends that are doing AI startups right now, right around me. So, and almost all of them are actually kind of in the application space, solving a very specific healthcare problem or very specific kind of vertical problems kind of in the way they're actually approaching and kind of building these companies. So I think a great amount of innovation for AI right now in India is happening there. Another aspect of what actually that recently, then, as I've been reading, that's starting is actually kind of, as you were also referring to kind of in your speech, I think we're not fully kind of in the space of like the LLMs, like to the likes of GPT-5 or Gemini 3 and so on and so forth. But we are actually starting to move into domain language models, like you're talking about, very specifically Indian languages, bringing solutions with Indian languages start becoming much more useful, like I think more precise in kind of application space. So I think there are like 4 or 5 players kind of right now actively investing, and in fact most of the India AI mission sorts funding and commissions, they are the one benefactors of such investments playing out. And then I think another space that I actually see definitely playing out in addition is these small language models also is another place in the Indian ecosystem that will take off quite a bit. Long shot, your projection that you were giving earlier seems, or we might even outdo the 8,000 that you're referring to, right? As I think if this takes on. So for us, I think the perspective that I was just kind of saying, kind of from a broader sense, power actually becomes, I mean, like 3 elements there, right? I think for us, one actually kind of is the access to the hardware, the chips, right? Especially if we stay in the application space more so, it'll become less of a challenge for us. But if we actually start going more into language models and India's innovation start gearing and wiring towards that, a need for GPUs or need for this actually starts increasing quite a bit. I mean, there are some out there, I think we're actually strategically trying to kind of do that, 38,000 GPUs kind of. Long shot, that becomes one very interesting consideration for us. How do we actually kind of put our thumbprint and kind of get access to this? Second aspect of it really is, I mean, as a developing country, I think the equation with power, I mean, you were talking about it on the side, right? The ability to kind of create these microgrids, the element of actually kind of creating kind of these hubs for data centers where there is dedicated power, uninterrupted and high quality aspect of it, like with dedicated substations. All of these actually start becoming very, very important for us. I mean, as we go from where we are at 1,600 to 8,000. The other aspect is, I think, our access to, again, cooling systems, right? I think at the chip level, right, like local cooling to basically aspect of those.
Perfect. And actually, you know, this also brings a very interesting point around the chip level activities which are being done, the investments, because yes, when we think of the AI infrastructure, chip becomes an integral part of that AI infrastructure. And by the way, you can also ask questions, so you start thinking about your questions that you want to ask to the panelists. I will take one more round of discussion here, and then I will open up for questions. So please, you know, be ready with your difficult ones that you have for the panelists. So we talked about the AI infrastructure, we talked about power and cooling and some of those aspects, but then let me also bring in the policy aspect here. And Devi, maybe you can touch on the policy aspect. Few initiatives have been done by the government of India, which starts with AI mission.
making it available, GPUs being available for customers, and then there was a recent announcement in the budget as well. What more do you think should be done?
So, for the longest time, I remember I used to keep saying that, um, but, when we used to talk about data centers, we used to say that India is such a large country and, we need space, storage space for 1.4 billion people. And I always used to think, why don't we talk of being a regional hub? And that can only happen if, we give tax breaks. That's the only way to attract people, attract operators into India. So I was personally very happy with this year's budget. Suddenly, every speech that we hear from, some of the key ministries, data centers is a point in it. So whether it's the budget, we heard Piyush Goyal's interview after the India-US trade agreement, where he kept harping on data centers as being one of the key areas where we can fulfill our commitment to purchase, to import from US. So, so data centers, finally, I think it's getting its due credit. I think more than the central government, I think what the central government has done with the budget is phenomenal. But more than that, I think it's the states that have individually started working on their, at the state level policy. Telangana has been a pioneer. They literally gave, a single window clearance in very less time. They managed to get land approvals, everything cleared, gave them incentives. That's been one of the, I think, case studies for India. Vizag is now becoming another example where we are seeing, whether it's benefits in terms of power, stamp duties, or, getting access to land. So I think there's more, from a policy standpoint, there's more at the state level happening. Maharashtra recently signed, at the Davos, they signed an agreement with Lodha for giving benefits in their park for data centers. So a lot of power benefits over there, power SOPs. So I think from a policy perspective, while, the data center policy is there at the central level, I think at the state level, we are seeing a lot more initiatives. Unfortunately, where I see the paralysis is not really at the policy level, it's at the execution level, at the bottom. So that has to percolate down. People have to understand the importance of it and, kind of support in the implementation. That's what I personally think. I think policy-wise, the right intention is there. People are, trying to get investments into their states, get investments into India, create large-scale data center parks. So all that is happening, but I think the implementation we need to see how the implementation happens.
So more state-level initiatives and execution. So Sujoy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think taking a different stab of the same problem, I think another area where government should revamp very quickly is on the education part of it. Because, and we have been talking about skilling, and this, as we move into the era of LLMs, okay, it's getting into serious maths. Okay, all we are talking of is serious maths. Okay, we are talking of the hardcore, the statistical models that we used to actually. It's actually a stab on that. When we are talking of vectors, it's all about that. Okay, and which effectively translates into a lot of research, right? So this is something that we have ignored, and there was an earlier panelist who was saying, look at organization and their percentage contribution to research. So I think it's also a mindset thing when it comes to India. And somehow the government has to take that lead from an educational standpoint for us to become serious, to build sovereign AI and sovereign AI models and to operate that in India, right? It's not going to be a overnight journey, definitely. But we will have to make this start because the world is moving at a rapid pace and a lot of things are quite frightening, so to say. Okay. That's definitely one part. One part that Devi perfectly attributed was to, in terms of tax breaks, absolutely required. That's the second part. And I think the third bit, I think government is anyway doing. I wouldn't say, the idea is to get into data governance and sovereign data governance. That's definitely the idea. The idea is not to do a knee-jerk one. The DPDP rules, which will eventually become a law very soon. That's effectively aimed at that. Much required with everything that's happening all around. Yeah, I think that's the way I would put it.
Okay. Yes. A quick remark from you, and then, friends, it will be your chance to ask questions. So be ready. Yes, Mandar.
I think when we are talking about policy, it should be looked at the holistic policy. I mean, we saw what data center policy is. He mentioned about the DPDP Act.
Yeah.
I personally feel nobody, or probably they are looking at, I'm not aware, is how do we come out with the policy for responsible AI? I think that's a missing beat of a piece, I believe, because when you talk about responsible AI, how do you ensure the technical guardrails, the operational guardrails, and so that should be a governing policy also for state as well as center when you are trying to set up the AI data center. I mean, you just can't say that I'm a service provider giving you an infra or a managed service. It should be part of it, because only then you are held accountable. So I think responsible AI should be tied up with data center policy and the DPDP. That's the only remark I had. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I
Yes,
think we
we
just
have-
saw that point in the recent war, right? Accountability of AI.
Yeah. So, question from the front desk, please.
We CTOs on the stage made sure Subhash can't ask a question.
TiECON. That's what you want to say? Okay. TiECON, TiECON.
Two different parts. Two different parts of the question. Let's look into the first part, which is the microgrid and the economics of actually, supporting these power-hungry data centers, and who pays for that actually. Yeah.
I think I'll attempt it because, as I said, I'm the IT, but I know a little bit of business of what Kirloskars are, and he's the CEO of that business, so obviously. But I think, as you rightly said, the adoption of microgrid for not only the data centers, but also for the enterprises and retail customers is the need. When I say retail customers, what again innovative idea we have started thinking about is how do we do a mobile microgrid? And you would soon see a prototype of it. That's what I would say. And that would, I think you mentioned during our dinner that it could be something you can carry in the bag. You carry a genset in a bag. So kind of a mobile-based microgrids is what we have already deployed in the northern parts of India for defense, where they really need the power, because there is no power there. I mean, it's a different story, but I think the application could be also reverse. So that's one bit we are doing. I think the second bit could also be that how do we ensure the cooling, more cooling to curb the heating. I think that would also give the less power consumption. That could also serve as reducing the overall power requirement. So for example, it could be a immersion cooling where your servers are immersionally cooled, and it also gives a better rack density. So you could go up to the 1 megawatt of the rack density if you do a immersive cooling. I think this too might address what you're trying to say, that how do we impact the society so that the power consumption becomes less and it doesn't impact. Yeah.
No, I agree with you because California in summer, our demand is about 50 to 55,000 megawatts. That's our demand. And we keep in reserves about 20%, 70,000 megawatts. So that is the level I'm talking about.
Exactly.
With the hyperscalers.
No,
It is very, very important that you address that. But you hit on one big part about dispatchable energy. When when I say dispatchable, you're
renewable.
connecting batteries to it. California has about 400 megawatts of battery installed, and we are going up to 1 gigawatt, and probably by next year. So the reason for that is because the way you're going to put the data centers and the way they're going to use it, the curve is going to be so different. The energy curve is going to be so different that your energy providers are going to have a big time problem supporting it.
I think in the US recently the people opposed that data center to come up, right? AI data. It was for the same purpose, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So
And
that
I
was the
think
attempt.
that's why Texas became one of the locations for Mr. Altman and OpenAI and Suzuki chairman and everybody to go and get that alternate energy sources and handle the spike in the California.
Right. So what we did was the two things that came out of that. One is Texas gave a big tax break, what Devi said.
So the
which is
policy part as
the
well.
policy part, which is very, very important. The second part is that Texas can have a lot of solar, and they
Yes.
can implement a lot of battery that can serve a data center.
Solar and wind as well, I believe. I
Yeah,
saw.
the wind comes from Oklahoma.
Okay.
But it does, yeah. And then the most important thing about this is we recently put in the Senate a law that will actually make the consumer happy, because people like me are paying the brunt for the data center. So now the law would say that they have to go net zero, which is what Mandar said, which is very, very important. So what happens is the data centers can only use power from the grid in an emergency. Otherwise, they have to be independent all the time. So happy to help from the policy side.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great inputs.
Great point.
Yeah. So we are right. Yes.
So when discussions like this happen, I think it's a moment for you to, at least it's a moment for me to realize that my knowledge is so limited to truly comprehensively answer these questions, because these are all big conversations we're happening. We're talking about power for the future, water for the future, the constraints that are going to come our way, and the need that is going to come our way. The only thought that actually really honestly keeps going through my mind is, right, necessity has always been the mother of invention in the human race, right? The deeper the need, I think the more creative we have become in actually figuring out alternatives and figuring out kind of mechanisms. So yeah, from a cooling perspective, water actually becomes a big player sometimes, but we have to go to mechanisms that actually do not rely on it. Right, on the power front, right, at the alternate power and microgrids and all of this. I do believe this demand actually will also cause phenomenal amount of research and discovery happening kind of in all of these adjacencies. Right, that's the other impact of AI. I think in the morning we were talking about potential loss of jobs and all of that. In the short term, yes, but in the long term, I think the amount of ripple effect that's going to happen across, it's going to be very interesting in its own right.
Yeah, and yeah. And especially, if I have to link your skill tech with the cooling, and especially the thread that you actually created, that's going to be opening up huge opportunities when it comes to even looking into liquid cooling. I mean, in the past, we used to talk about hot aisle, cold aisle, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years back. It has its own set of limitations. But now as we think more of the liquid cooling, especially to support the high dense requirements, I believe will be requirement even for skilled manpower. I mean, I was having a debate on what would be those new skills that AI infrastructure will create. Will that be around people who are specialized in alternate power, alternate cooling, liquid cooling, AI-based observability? Those kind of skills would be actually needed. So I know it's a wider response to a question, but I think that's where the new skills will be created.